Welcome back to Sunday Live. We're in our talk studio and happy to have with us Cabinet Secretary for Industrialization and Enterprise Development, Adan Mohamed. And you have a Homa, so Polesana, thank you for coming in though. A huge docket, industrialization and enterprise development. But let's start with the whole issue of industrialization in Kenya and the fact that looking back, so many industries looked like they were literally killed, whether it was incompetence or negligence. I'm not sure, from your nuts in the coastal area to your pan papers. So how do you even begin, Adan?
Thank you very much, Julie. First of all, I think many of the developed countries that you see today haven't gotten there without going through industrialization process. So it's really critical for countries, in order to prosper, to go through that phase. Now, we've got a lot of catch-up to do as a country, but it's a necessary phase for us to go through. Now, if I look back and see the history of industrialization, the process, the successes, the failures that we've seen in this country, there are things that stand out. One is, for government-owned businesses, there has always been the mentality of a serikali, mali ya umma concept that hasn't given people the incentives to really drive these businesses to success. But for those private sector owned businesses, the markets have actually failed them. We've had policies which were put by government in place to try and support these businesses. So we put on policies on tariffs, we put in issues to try and see how we can protect these businesses as they are coming up. But we break all those policies ourselves. So we put duties on rice, for example. When we have some wonderful rice plantations in Mwea here in Kenya, we still get rice coming through the port of Mombasa disguised as other things. So how on earth would they succeed? And then I think finally the bigger issues that support industries like energy costs, cost of doing business, road and infrastructure. These are all failures in the markets that have really contributed to the dismal performance of these businesses or industries in the last 50 years.
You've mentioned one of the biggest problems, which of course is energy and access to markets. And this week actually is Industrialization Week. Yeah. And what are you setting out as your plan to address the situation and transform the Kenyan economy?
Julie, it's been 6 months since we've been appointed into cabinet, and there's been a lot of learning that I have as an individual, having had to go through.
Coming from private sector.
Coming from private sector and banking environment, for that matter. And that involved a lot of listening, talking to people. I've made it my business to see 3 investors, industrialists on a daily basis. Part of that is to gather information from them. What is working? What is not working? What really is broken? What can we do differently? Then meeting industry associations, sector players, to try and to try and get the feel for what is the real issues. And oftentimes you get some specific problems. Businesses talk about their own businesses, but my intention is to try and understand what is it that we need to do to take this country forward in a big way. And so major issues, I talked about energy and infrastructure costs. That continues to drag our industries down for a very long time. I'm really pleased that the government has made financial commitments towards those areas. So railway, standard gauge railway commitments have been made. Energy costs, we've got 1.7 gigawatts of power in this country, and we've managed to get to this level in the last 50 years. In the next 14 months, the plan is to increase that by another 5,000 megawatts. So some serious commitments to try and deal with issues that are making industries struggle are being dealt with. So really, so far I have been listening, understanding, and what I want to do is to unveil the plan that I see for this country, share with the necessary stakeholders, and I'm looking forward to that next week.
Speaking, we can achieve what is being called the Rwanda model here in Kenya?
Very much so, and it's not impossible. I think every year the World Bank and others that are conducted by talking to ordinary people, businesses, to try and get a feel for what is it like to do business in country X, country Y. The reality is our ranking globally has been disappointing for a number of reasons. Whether it's registering a property in Kenya, where we are ranked at number 169 out of 183 countries, or registering a business, or actually trying to, write a contract. These are all things that are not insurmountable. They don't require a lot of money to fix, like you see in building infrastructure. So His Excellency the President has actually directed that we try and see how we can radically improve our positions vis-a-vis some of the players that we're competing against on the continent. And so the plan is underway to try and see how we can improve our perception. Remember, ease of doing business there's some element of it that is perception. There's also some degree of it that's reality. We
but
don't want
ease of doing business in Kenya is
precisely.
It's not just perception, it remains a challenge.
We don't want to run away from that.
Right.
An investor in Hong Kong wanting to invest in Africa reads that report, and whether it's perception or reality, that is what he or she gets. So we need to fix that, and that, I think, is something that has already started underway.
Okay, we'll continue to keep an eye on that, but just coming back to the whole idea of industrialization in your docket, which is enterprise development, and of course now the existence of our county structures. Yeah. So how is your ministry going to work with county governments to address these issues?
I think of course the coming up of counties and the new devolved system of government has brought to the same degree a certain amount of celebration, but also some degree of anxiety in how things get coordinated between the various arms of government. And for me, as I've been thinking through how we can drive the agenda forward, I always remind myself that Kenya is nothing more than a collection of the 47 counties that we have. And so we should try and compete with other countries that are outside, not necessarily between ourselves. Whilst that is relevant and necessary, I think the bigger issue is how can we compete with countries that are attracting investments as opposed to coming into, if investment comes to Machakos or Kiambu, it really is good for us either way. But if it goes to another country, it's an issue. So one of the things that I need to set up in working with governors is to make sure that we can develop a program, something similar to a master plan that we can develop that has defined rules and regulations for how to deal with investors that come into a country. It doesn't help very much to have free land in this county and the investor go and take that piece of paper, go to another county and say, I've been given 5 here, can you give me 10? So that, I think, is something that we need to work with. It's still early days, but is on the table for discussion with the governors.
What you've mentioned just now is critical, because what's happening right now with county governments is there are no rules or regulations as to how they engage with investors. So it's very arbitrary, and as you were saying, you could be issuing 5 acres here, 10 acres there, but what are the minimum standards that should be set for investors? If you get this much goodwill from a county, what does the county and the people of a county expect back from you? Is this something that your ministry would be dealing with?
Absolutely. Today, you come across thousands of investors, local, foreigners, and you can't tell who is genuine and who is not. We want to give everybody benefit of doubt and think they're all genuine. That's fine. But the issue is, what should the rules of engagement be? How should we treat? If you give an investor a piece of land for free to come and build a factory, are they allowed to mortgage that land, to actually get a loan, and then do what with it? Effectively, that investor has not brought in any capital into this country, which is in the first place why we are giving the land to an investor. So what we need to do is, investors want to see what the government is able to do on their part in building infrastructure, defining the rules of doing business in this country. How can we attract them into this country vis-a-vis the other? Then investors will say, wow, then we would like to invest. That is what I hear every time from an investor. You show us the infrastructure, show us what the rules of engagement are, what are your tax regimes that are not going to change in the next 2 years but are likely to be more predictable. And those are some of the rules that we need to define, I think, across the country. Because remember, there are some rules that county governments will set. There are others that the national government will have to set.
And you know, when it comes to expectations of the people and the county governments from investors, and you know, just looking at who owns Kenya over the past few weeks and the extractive industries, the mining, noting the lack of any Kenyan or even African presence in ownership of many of these countries. Is this something we should be thinking seriously about?
I think at the moment, we wouldn't want to discriminate between local or foreign. Of course, the benefit domestic investors have over anybody else is they understand the terrain much better, they understand the network, they understand how businesses is done in this country. And so we will encourage domestic investors as much as possible to try and, you know, invest in this country. You know, foreigners will come and do partnerships, which is something that we welcome as well. Of course, there are some industries which are also very strictly regulated in terms of foreign local ownership. But the point is, I think we are open for business as a country to the international community as well as local. And what we want is just to make sure that we allow people to come and set up businesses here for the long haul.
Okay. Before we wind up, we hope to be speaking much more with you. This is just the beginning. As you've said, you've done been doing a lot of research for 6 months. People were asking me, ask him where's he been? Right. We used to see him when he was in Barclays. The change is a significant change from private sector into government, as you said, from banking now. But I think there's a connection, obviously, with your ministry, Industrialization and Enterprise Development. What have been what's the biggest shock factor for you so far?
I think, as I said, there has been a lot of learning, and learning the new organization, if I may call it that way. And when you come into a much bigger organization than the one that you've been in, you need to understand relationships, stakeholder management, how businesses are conducted, to make sure that how things can be executed first, and so on and so forth. One of the things that I've learned in government so far is there are so many rules, and those rules must be followed. Now, the intentions are absolutely right, but I think some of those rules and processes have played a significant part in delaying things from happening as quickly as one would have liked. I think the second thing that, you know, one day I would like to see changed is how we can incentivize and motivate some of the people in public service who are doing a stellar job, so that they can actually do more and encourage others to actually emulate some of their achievements within the public service.
So there we have bureaucracy. I mean, you didn't say the word, but it is there. And then incentivizing those who perform well. And it's good to hear there are some of those within the civil service, you know, doing a great job. What now, in essence, at the end of this week or during this week, how can Kenyans engage on the whole issue of industrialization?
I think there are a couple of things that I just want to mention that really stood out for me as a wake-up call for us as a country. If you think about it, there are nearly 4 million or so people who are unemployed today. And on average, about 1 million people come into the job market every year. And out of that 1 million new entrants, about half of those get absorbed. Now, if you extrapolate that and see 500,000 people unemployed every year, by the year 2030, we will probably have 12 million people that will be unemployed in this country. Now, that is a ticking time bomb. We must find a solution to that. That's number one, key, you know, findings for me. The second one is, in Vision 2030, we've made it very clear, and is a vision that I think we should all embrace 100%, and is the right thing for us as a country. We've defined Kenya to be a middle-income country by 2030. What that means in terms of GDP growth, our GDP today is about 42 billion, population 42 million. So GDP per capita is about $1,000 per person. To get to the Vision 2030 target, our GDP needs to grow from $42 billion today to 216 billion by 2030. That is 5 times the growth. Now, the rules of the game, the paths that we have trodden so far will never take us there. And without going into a lot of detail, the one thing that I see as a transformational opportunity for us is to find ways of creating special economic zones in this country. And that is one of the things that I would like to highlight to Kenyans in the course of the next week.
So special economic zones, you'll be talking about it this week at the during the Industrialization Week. So keep an eye on that. It will be in the news, and I'm sure you can share your views on social media. We've got Kenya Vision 2030 on social media as well, and we'll share those links with you and those contacts, the hashtag and the handles as well, so you can make your views known. And a big thank you to you for coming in, and we hope to connect with you again. You've given us some shocking numbers, and you are at the helm of a critical ministry. So wish you all the best in your efforts, and we certainly will be keeping in touch with what you're doing. We're taking a break on Sunday Live, but we'll be back in just a short while. Don't go away.